Mark Levin, how are you, my man?
I'm good, brother. How are you?
I'm good. I'm glad to have you on.
You don't like the Cuban paradise?
I think at some point we got to say let's normalize relations and then drive Castro out.
I mean, they got free health care and free education. What do you want?
It's Obama's ideal. We can show people. If we could open it up, Mark, we could take people down there and show them what Obama's all about. I have to tell you, I am delighted to have you on, my friend.
Well, it is an honor. It really is.
I know you're not doing much, if any, local radio, because you come out of the bunker in sporadic bits, but I've seen you all over the national news, and the book is number one, Ameritopia, number one on Amazon. It'll debut as number one on New York Times.
Wait a minute, you think so?
Yeah.
I hope so.
Are you kidding me? Have you ever debuted it? I mean, Men in Black didn't. That's just because it was over the head of most Americans.
But we did okay, and you helped that too.
Well, I have to tell you that's a great read, my friend. That's a great read.
That's how we met each other, isn't it?
It is. Not a lot of guys, Mark. Not a lot. Mark Levin's our guest. Not a lot of guys that can write a bestseller about rescuing a dog.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court and liberty and a tome that compares the Hobbesians to John Locke's philosophies and states of nature. I mean, this is heady stuff. You're a Renaissance man, Mark.
Well, don't you do this sort of thing? Seriously, you think these thoughts, don't you?
I think them. I don't reduce them to writing nearly as well as you do.
Well, the thing is, it does take a lot of time. And this book took 16 months, and I wanted it to come out now because, Michael, you think about these things all the time, so do I. And I really wanted to get to the bottom, from a philosophical point of view, of what is this force that allures millions and millions of people to it and then destroys them. And on the other hand, the Founding Fathers didn't wake up one day and come up with consent of the governed and natural law and individual sovereignty, and it was, I think, a worthy pursuit to figure out where all that came from. Now, I kind of knew, but on the other hand, I just thought it was time to dig deep and to lay it out, because as you explained and as I explained, this is it. We are standing on the edge of a cliff, and America will survive. The question is, what kind of America will survive? And I think so much of what the federal government does now is unconstitutional. So much of what it does is nothing to do with the rule of law. So what are we? What have we become? We're not a constitutional republic, really. We're not a federal republic, really, anymore. We're not a representative republic, really, anymore, given the courts and given the bureaucracy. So what are we? What we are is an Ameritopia where some of us are fighting to get America back. And basically what I mean by that is, what is this philosophy that underlays statism, that pushes for this concentrated, centralized power and promises all these things, paradise and equality, and it's utopianism. And that's what it is, whether you find it in Plato's Republic or Thomas Hobbes' Utopia or Thomas More's Leviathan or the Communist Manifesto. It is an attempt to destroy the individual, reshape the individual, and create a mass of people who work for the state.
Mark Levin's our guest. Mark, one of the things that sticks in my mind is Churchill's great line about being a young liberal and then maturing into a conservative. And of the people that particularly listen to my show and listen to your show, I find a lot of people who were C students or worse in school, who may have grown up liberals or just grew up disconnected. They were more worried about chasing girls or finding a job. And they achieve some point, usually around 40 years old, where they wake up and look at the world around them. And you have been a big part of this resurgence in looking back at the kinds of documents and writings that formed our nation. And I find it fascinating that here's a book that's a bestseller that is not a racy thriller. It's not a John Grisham, that type of thing. It's not sci-fi. I mean, we're talking about stuff that, frankly, the same sorts of thoughts you're laying out were laid out to us in high school and college, and most people slept through that. And here they are, 45, and you've put a little flourish on it. But frankly, you're getting people back to the basics, the foundation. That's pretty neat that you can do that and still be a bestseller.
Well, you're very kind. I just felt, after Liberty and Tyranny, that I think our audiences and other people, too, are ready to take it a step further, to really understand what is a philosophical divide in this country. And I think when you understand the philosophical divide, you'll cherish this society and liberty more, and you'll fear Obama and what these folks are doing more, too. I'll give you an example. You and I can say, look, we want to comply with the Constitution. That's what we believe in. That's the rule of law. What does the other side say? I mean, on my show, on your show, I say things like, well, where's your design? Where are you taking us? Exactly how much power does this branch have or that? They can't tell you. So it is this constant abstraction that they're pushing. It is a dogma. It's specific, yet it's ambiguous, and they are dragging us all in this direction, a direction where they have a general idea where they want to take us. They call it a blueprint. But on the other hand, they don't know the specifics of it. And you're going to hear Obama tonight with the State of the Union, Michael, and he's going to do things like talk about these grandiose and ambitious plans, and they're all for the future because he couldn't deliver on them, in the here and now. And they can never deliver on them on the here and now because they're impracticable and they're impossible. And thank God that they are.
Mark, are you? I have to go to a break. Can you hold with me? I'm mindful of your time. I know you don't come out of the bunker often, and this counts as out of the bunker time. Can you hold with me?
I can, brother.
All right. The book is Ameritopia. Of course, it's number one on Amazon's bestseller list. There was a group of people that Mark was not happy with who went on the first day it came out, before they'd even had a chance to read it, and gave it a 1-star rating. I thought that was beneath those folks. Anybody who reads Mark Levin's writings knows that it's first class, and the real testament is the sales of the book. But everything the guy writes, rescuing a dog or saving the country, goes to the top. Mark Levin, our guest, Ameritopia, coming up. Our guest is the great one, Mark Levin. I've told you a number of times, but I got my start outside of Houston. Mark Levin let me guest host on his show. What a whole lot of fun. You go home after the show and you get emails from literally all over the world from folks who listen to his show. He's been very, very, very kind to me in my radio career. I've asked him a number of questions and bits of advice off air in working on my own book and truly in my own career. And he never fails. And I think you learn a lot about people, not when they're on the air or in front of a camera, but when they're off air. How much time do you spend bringing up the next group, building a farm team for your movement? And Mark Levin's done more for me than any radio personality in the country, more than any 10 combined. He introduced me to Sean Hannity. He's given me constructive feedback. He stood up for me when I've said things that brought myself under attack, and I am forever grateful to him. The book is called Ameritopia. It's, of course, the bestseller. Everything since Rescuing Sprite, I believe, that Mark Levin writes goes immediately to number one and stays there for a while and becomes sort of continuing education for not just conservatives, but I think a lot of folks. He is our guest. And, Mark, let's talk, if we could,
hold on. Let me say something. You're so generous in your comments there. But the truth is, you sought me out first years ago. You remember this?
I do, very well.
When I wrote Men in Black, and you invited me to Houston, and I don't go anywhere. And I came to Houston, and I know your audience knows this because you're extremely popular there. You're a great radio host. So go ahead.
Oh, you're too kind. So let's talk about the election. I listened to your show last night, and I heard a couple of things. It was, my favorite moment listening to Rush Limbaugh is when he says, "Right on, right on." I found myself saying that last night when you were, and I know you haven't chosen a horse, just like I haven't, but you comment as you see it, and you made some comments about some of the things Gingrich had said, and his attacks or his joust with Romney, and I hear you saying, much as I've said, just not as well, establishment, back off and let the voters decide this thing.
Right. And you know what? The establishment doesn't have a choice because the voters are going to decide this thing. And that is a great accomplishment for we the people because if Romney winds up being the guy, he needs a lot of work, doesn't he? I mean, if he can't even defend his own career, what's that all about?
Walk me through, Mark Levin, author of Ameritopia, available now at all booksellers and online. Mark Levin, walk me through Mitt Romney. If he's the nominee, you were around during the Reagan years. You were part of those years. How do you get the base excited? Because nobody's going to vote for Obama, but the question is, do they get excited?
Well, I'm going to tell you something. You may not like it. I don't think the base will or can get excited about Romney, per se, because he doesn't give them a reason to. He doesn't give me a reason to. They've been arguing his electability. Well, I mean, he lost to McCain, and he has to fight his way through the Republican primary before he's electable in any respect. He's never been part of the conservative movement or a conservative voice, for that matter. So people just are still trying to figure out who Mitt Romney is and taking to measure the man. Now, they're concerned about some of the other candidates, so maybe they're leaning in his direction, but that's wearing off because, and I must tell you from my own perspective, I'm not so sure Romney is the best guy to beat Obama. I mean, I have said on the air that if I were voting today, I'd probably vote for Santorum, Michael, because I find him, with some of his very bad votes, to be the most consistent of the bunch up there, and also he's a likable guy. I mean, to me, and he doesn't have all this stuff in his closet. So, but maybe many people don't agree with me. I don't tell people how to vote. I don't believe in that.
Right. Mark Levin's our guest. The book is Ameritopia. I want to ask you, and you and I have talked off air about this.
Yeah.
The Ron Paul supporters, and I know you've had your battles with them, and you've given as well as you've taken. But for those, I look at this and I go, look, I want to beat Obama in November, and I say, and I've said this to Ron Paul supporters. Sometimes you folks are your own worst enemy, but there is almost a war between not just you, but a lot of folks and them, and who started it doesn't matter. How do we get those folks in November? I mean, Bill Kristol last week, in my opinion, disturbingly, says we don't want Ron Paul. We don't want his supporters. He can go run third party. I mean, that's not true.
That's absurd. And as a matter of fact, that's been part of what I've been saying. The fact that Ron Paul will not definitively say, walk up to the line and do a little fan dance, but he won't definitively say that he will not go third party is unacceptable to me. You don't run in the Republican primary and then, in the end, potentially lose, and then say, all right, I'm taking my marbles, I'm going third party, and elect Barack Obama. I consider Barack Obama an existential threat to my children and to my family and the future of this nation. And the fact that the man won't give us a definitive statement is very troubling to me. So what I've said is, and Rand Paul, I'm actually quite friendly with and supported him early on when nobody ever heard of him down in Kentucky. I've made the point, which apparently has been controversial and has upset Rand Paul, that if his father goes third party and winds up electing Obama and harming my children in the course of this thing, and yours too, then I'm going to drag my ass down to Kentucky and work against his election and for a conservative. Because if Ron Paul thinks so little of my children, then so be it. I do not want him to go third party. Bill Kristol's absolutely wrong. As for the Ron Paul supporters, there are a lot of nice people who are Ron Paul supporters. I get emails and comments from them too. But there's a circle of advisors that he has who are extremely nasty, and some of the followers are really crackpots who come out of these disparate movements and have these disparate beliefs that are not in any respect conservative and in many respects not even libertarian. That is mainstream libertarian. So, and among those who are most critical are some of the libertarian outlets like Reason Magazine. So my problem is with that, and furthermore, I think Ron Paul's foreign policy will drag us ultimately into a war after we're hit, because this sort of Neville Chamberlain nonsense has preceded every major war we've been in.
Mark, I want to get one thing out. I have 30 seconds. You know what the clocks are like. You've made an endorsement for the U.S. Senate seat in the state of Texas.
Yes, I have. Cruz, I think he's far and above the best, and I've known him for a long time. He's solid as a rock. He'd be in there with Rubio. He'd be in there with DeMint. And I believe DeMint's endorsed him. I'm not sure.
Absolutely. DeMint, Lee, Toomey, Americans.
Cruz is wonderful. He'd be a great senator.
As are you. Mark Levin, Ameritopia. Thank you, sir.
God bless, Michael.
Special favor there. He's not doing much local radio. We appreciate you, Mark Levin.